In this life, each of us has more or less passed by religion, faith, or some path of practice. Some are born into religious families. Some only begin to explore it as they grow up. There are also those who have never followed any religion, but still always ponder about cause and effect, about how to live rightly and more lightly. Many times we go to the temple, listen to the Dharma, and read sutras, but then we still feel our mind is the same as before. Still angry when others go against our wishes, still sad over very small things, still worried about things that have not happened. At that moment, a very genuine question naturally arises in the heart. What is the purpose of practicing if life still has so much insecurity? This question is not doubt. It is a very sincere question, the concern of those who truly care about the value and purpose of practice. It is thanks to such questions that we can look deeper into the nature of the path we are on. In fact, practice is not to become a different person or to ensure a better life after this one. Practice, first and foremost, is to clearly understand one's own life, to understand how the mind operates, to understand why we suffer, and to understand how to gradually reduce suffering by transforming the mind, not by force, not by blind faith, but by understanding, contemplation, and practicing living anew each day. When we recognize the origin of suffering, we learn to lessen it step by step. This process is a journey of self-discovery and inner transformation, not a denial or abandonment of one's own nature. Why do people suffer? Why does the ego make us tired? And why, if wisdom and compassion walk together, can they help lighten this life so much? It's just that at the end of the year, we sit down together, look back on the path of practice, like a path of life. When it comes to practice or religion, many people often immediately think about changing beliefs, from one religion to another, from one tradition to another. But if we look closely, we will see that most of human suffering does not lie in believing wrongly, but in having an unstable mind. But if you only change the external form without looking back at your own heart, you will still feel tired wherever you go, just as before. In everyday life, we can see this very clearly. A family may change the feng shui of their house many times, but if their lifestyle remains chaotic, the new house will quickly become stifling. On the other hand, some people live in very simple spaces, but with a stable mind, any place becomes easy to live in. The same applies to spiritual practice. It is not the place of practice that brings peace, but whether the mind has a root or not. In a temple, some people stay for a long time, chanting sutras, reciting Buddha's name, and meditating regularly. Yet whenever a small, unpleasant event occurs, afflictions arise quickly. It's not because they don't know the Dharma, but because their practice has not reached the root of the mind. Spiritual practice is not about making yourself different from others, but about calming the mind so it is less disturbed by life. If you only worry about finding a new path without looking back at the path you are on, no matter what you change, it will not solve the inner fatigue. Therefore, the important thing is not which tradition we follow, but whether we are learning to live wisely, kindly, and causing less suffering to ourselves and others. Some say, "You don't need to practice, just live well." This sounds very true, but living well is not always easy. When pride is hurt, when misunderstood, when facing loss and disappointment, when confronted with difficulties and challenges, if the inner self is not trained, people easily become shaken and lose direction. Spiritual practice is the process of building and strengthening that spiritual foundation, helping each person to stand firm before all the changes in life. Without inner strength, living well is very fragile. Therefore, spiritual practice is not to gain more fame or to do more things, but to build an inner foundation for oneself. When the mind has roots, we stand firmer before praise and criticism. When the mind has roots, we are not easily pulled away by anger or fear. Spiritual life is like planting a tree. If we only focus on changing the external appearance while neglecting to nurture the inner roots, the tree will struggle to grow firmly. The inner self needs to be cared for and nurtured regularly to bring true peace. Only when the roots are strong can the tree sprout new buds and grow sustainably. On the contrary, if the mind is still unsettled, then no matter where you are or which method you practice, the feeling of insecurity will always be present. When asked the question, "What is practicing spiritual discipline?" many people immediately think of the external form. Practicing is shaving the head. Practicing is wearing brown or blue robes. Practicing is chanting sutras, meditating, observing precepts. All of these are correct, but they have not yet touched the deepest part of practicing. Practicing is learning how not to let the mind be swept away too quickly. In daily life, we rarely realize that our mind is constantly running, just waking up, already worrying about work. Not yet finished eating, already thinking about tomorrow. Hearing a sentence and interpreting all sorts of things. The mind runs fast. The body is restless wherever it is. Practicing, first and foremost, is learning to see that movement. With the same task, one person works in stress, another works in ease, not because of different circumstances, but because of a different mind. What makes the difference is not the amount of work, whether much or little, but whether the mind gets swept away by the work or not. When the mind is swept away, every small matter becomes big. A piece of advice turns into criticism. A small mistake becomes an offense. A difficulty becomes a deadlock. Not because the matter is harder, but because the mind no longer has space. Spiritual practice is creating a pause in the mind. That pause is not to escape, but to see clearly. When there is a pause, we see the emotions arising. We see the reaction wanting to burst out, and we have the chance to choose how to respond. In family life, this is very important. When children say something disagreeable, if parents can pause in time, the words that follow will be completely different, no longer irritated out of habit, but beginning to listen. Thus, the family becomes lighter. Spiritual practice is not about sitting in meditation for hours to get results. Just a moment of knowing how to pause is already a step in practice. Pause to see, I am angry. I am worried. Just see it. No need to fix anything yet. When we get used to seeing the mind naturally slows down. Like when entering a temple, without the teacher saying anything, the steps naturally become lighter. Not because of the space, but because the mind adjusts itself. We have just learned that suffering arises from the mind's reactions to events in life. However, this raises an important question. Where do these mental reactions truly originate? To understand better, we need to explore more deeply the source of psychological reactions. This will be the key to decoding the nature of suffering and how humans can overcome it. And that is the point we will examine more closely. If suffering does not lie in circumstances, but right in the mind's reactions, then where do those reactions come from? Most of the mind's reactions revolve around something very familiar. The ego. When the ego is praised, the mind feels comfortable. When the ego is criticized, the mind becomes angry. When the ego is favored, everything feels easy. This is not unfamiliar. Even in the smallest daily activities, we can clearly see this. In the family, just one sentence that touches on pride, the atmosphere immediately changes. In the temple, it is the same. A small matter in the community, if someone feels their opinion is not heard, the mind immediately feels heavy. Not because of a big issue, but because the ego has been touched. When the ego is touched, the mind quickly looks for reasons to defend itself. We explain. We justify. We analyze who is right and who is wrong. But if you look closely, you will see that the more you try to protect the ego, the more troubled the mind becomes. It's like stirring muddy water. The more you stir, the murkier it gets. Buddhism calls this state attachment to the self. It's not attachment to something lofty, but attachment to the thought, I am right. I must get my way. When you cling like this, all the changes in life easily become sources of suffering. Some people think that reducing the ego makes them weak, but actually, that's not true. When the ego is too big, we are very vulnerable. Just one word, one glance, one unsatisfactory attitude, and the mind becomes unsettled. On the contrary, when the ego softens, what others say no longer has as strong an impact as before. In temples, longtime practitioners are often not people who are free from criticism, but those who are not made to suffer much by criticism, not because they are superior, but because their ego no longer needs excessive protection. It's the same in real life. There are people who have worked for decades, receiving all kinds of praise and criticism, but they still maintain a calm demeanor, not because they have no emotions, but because they don't let the ego control their entire inner life. Seeing this, we begin to understand that spiritual practice is not about destroying the ego, but about clearly observing how the ego operates. Once understood, we identify less with it. When angry, we know we are angry. When worried, we know we are worried. Instead of thinking, I am that anger, or I am that worry, this distinction alone creates a very important space, the space between the observer and the arising emotion. And it is precisely in that space that freedom begins to appear. From here, a very natural shift occurs. When we are no longer pulled too strongly by the ego, we start to see things more broadly. We see more perspectives, and the mind becomes lighter because of it. This path requires no force, no self-denial, just clear seeing, and everything will gradually change by itself. Once we realize that most strong emotional reactions stem from the ego, the next step is not to fight it, but to look closely at what that ego really is. See?